We usually have an opening question, so
Okay.
I'll start off with that. Uh, Pilot say what?
What?
Exactly. Welcome to another episode of Pilots Say What, where we hear what pilots have to say. But in this case, we are talking to an AME, and I'm very excited to have you on. And I'll allow you to introduce yourself in just a moment. But I'd like to say that we'll get into some of these questions that people may have about attaining your medical, and again, we'll maybe you'll be better at giving a little bit more terminology than I am. So we'll jump straight into it. Would you like to introduce yourself for the listeners?
Sure. Howdy. I'm Adam Carter. I'm a AME in Flower Mound, Texas. I've been an AME now for about 10 years and been a senior AME, so available to do class one and class two medicals for about 7 years or
Awesome.
so. Yeah, I love it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of questions personally, but I want to try to keep in mind the listeners here, and I'm sure there's a lot of things to kind of debunk or get details about. But uh, first, can I ask? It's Aviation Medical Examiner, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, just to make sure. And then, secondly, to be like a senior AME, that just means you're experienced in it at this point.
So it means that, yeah, you basically have to have 3 years of experience, and
Okay.
then you apply for the designation with the FAA,
Mm.
and then they bless you, and then you're good to go.
Yeah, and then you're sanctioned, if you will.
Yes.
Gotcha. So what I'm a little bit curious about, I don't want to spend too much time because I want to get to some of these burning questions, I guess. But I'd like to know a little bit about how you became an AME and what kind of leads someone to that uh, to this role.
Oh, basically, it's just a love of aviation.
Hmm.
My story is that I started flying, and then you have you know all the time but no money, then you have all the money but no time, and then life gets in the way.
Hmm.
So I have about 40 hours to my private certificate
Okay.
in multiple different types of aircraft,
Hmm.
and loved it and wanted to figure out a way, because I'm not sure if I'm ever going to have the opportunity
Hmm.
to finish, but just wanted to keep involved, and because I
Hmm.
love talking aviation.
Right.
And so this is something I've always wanted to do,
Yeah.
and to get into being an AME. Basically, the way the FAA sees it, you got to wait till somebody either dies or retires.
Uh-huh.
Like I said, I've been doing this for about 10 years now, and it took me 10 years to get the designation. Moved
Awesome.
into Texas from out of state, and I started the process up in the Northeast with no success. And
Yeah. And then in Texas was kind of the place where you can find your
yeah,
footing.
yeah. So
Yeah.
they had availability, and I started out in Mesquite, and then moved over to Flower Mound about 4 years ago.
Gotcha. And again, I just so that I'm kind of aware, when you started out in Mesquite, what is it that you kind of start off doing to start working towards your
So
ME?
basically, you apply it to the FAA, and then the FAA
Mm.
accepts your application, and then the CAMI, which is the Civilian Aeromedical Institute, which is the part of the FAA
Mm.
that deals with medical issues, is based out of Oklahoma City.
Okay.
So you go up there for, it's about a week course
Mm.
on on the regulations, on physiology, and all things related
Mm.
to being an AME.
Mhm.
And then after that, you get certified.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, so for the people who are listening, let's just start with maybe the fact that someone is looking into aviation and they've stumbled upon listening to this or watching this on YouTube. And could you explain what role you play in people's beginning their career? Because people need to get a medical certificate, right? So
Right.
what does that kind of look like?
So basically, what they talk about, what's your mission,
Hmm.
and if your mission is you just want to go for the $100 hamburger, then your option is, or your best option, I should say, is the third class medical, which is pretty. It's a basic exam.
Hmm.
They want to, the FAA is looking for, to keep everybody safe.
Yeah.
So it's vision, a urine test, and it's not a drug screen. It's just seeing if you have diabetes.
Hmm.
And used to be diabetes was a death sentence in terms of getting certificate, a
Hmm.
medical certificate,
Right.
but that's not so anymore across all classes.
Okay.
So basically, if what your mission is, if you want to go air transport, then you need a class one.
Hmm.
Class two is general commercial operations. My words, not the FAA's.
Okay.
But basically, there's slight differences in terms of vision requirements between class one and class two, and there are a couple of other things.
Hmm. And
So
the most significant seems to be maybe some of the site stuff.
yeah, and I think across all classes now, the FAA is realizing that maybe they were, set the bar a little too high. So with things like ADHD or ADD,
Hmm.
anxiety, and things like that, post-traumatic stress disorder, they think, all the veterans who are coming out of the military who are service connected for things like that. And so
Yeah.
they're, I wouldn't say use the word liberalized, but they're sort of the more looking at it with more finesse. And
Hmm.
uh,
Looking for more ways to progress through some of those things
yes,
potentially.
their duty first is to public safety, but they also understand that, we're human and that
Hmm.
we have to, you know, balance it out.
Right, account for some nuance here and there, and understand what kind of things are going on these days. Yeah, so I know that some of those things can be, roadblocks for some people, and we're working on that. It seems like so going to class three, it's not much of a difference either between.
The vision requirements are much less stringent.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the vision requirements are the things that pop into mind right now.
Right.
In terms of depending on your age,
Hmm.
so a first class medical, um, requires at age 35 a baseline EKG,
Hmm.
and then an EKG every year after age 40.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
and so,
That's the main things. Okay, gotcha. And then last thing on this is because I think in some of our YouTube comments and things like that, I've noticed that the question tends to be around eyesight. And and if this is too convoluted of an answer, that's fine. But are there any automatic issues and denials based on eyesight, and what does that kind of look like?
well, eyesight, you've got to be, at least for class one 2020 corrected.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Um, and it's just like if you have a driver's license and you wear glasses, it says must wear corrective lenses. And that's what it says
Okay.
on your medical. And, there are other physiologic conditions that may require the FAA to do a little digging. I actually had a
Mm.
pilot the other day
Mhm.
who had something that was benign. So I actually called the FAA and said, "Hey, this is the condition. Can I issue right away?" And they were like, "Let me look into it." And they were like, "Yeah." I mean, that doesn't mean that they may not reach out to the pilot in the next couple months and say, "Hey, we need some more information." But
Mm.
so, basically the vision requirement is like 2020 corrected.
That makes sense. Okay, gotcha. And then when is it the appropriate time to come get uh, an examination when you're looking into flying?
Okay. I mean, and it sort of depends if, on your medical history. If you
Right.
have, you know, any questions about your medical history or you
Right.
think you might have questions, do it as far in advance of when you want to start as possible.
All right.
I can't give you an average length of time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but
Sooner the better. Sounds
yeah,
like.
basically, if you have no major, health history, like if you're not diabetic, you're not on, ADHD medications, you don't have any cardiac history,
Mm-hmm.
um, things like that. If you have a clean slate, that's fine. But then you've got to account for if you find an AME and they can, because they're not not relatively not that many of us. So
Right.
then you want to make sure you can get in and get everything done that you need to in a timely manner.
Right. And then that still counts at least a little bit of time for a little bit of time if something does sort of pop up, maybe.
Yep.
I guess we'll come back around because I do have questions about the the potential process of needing to correct some things if you do become deferred. And just to give a bit of reference to the audience or whoever may be listening. Uh, so if you are looking into starting your aviation career, whether you're going to be starting Part 61 or Part 141 or like any of the things you said earlier, this is one of the first steps you take. Um, One of the first steps you would take to make sure that you're qualified to fly plane or to start training. I just want to put that out there to be very clear if anyone's not
Mhm.
not already sure of that. Well, moving on. Let's say someone gets there, they get their examination done, and they're going to be starting, their career soon. What are some of the next steps? Like, what are they doing with their certificate that they'd be getting from an AME?
So basically, it's like your driver's license.
Okay.
You need to have that on your person when you fly.
Okay.
And so it's just, I mean, basically, you come, you get your exam,
Yeah.
you get blessed by me or any other AME.
Mhm.
They transmit your application and print out your certificate, and you're good to go.
Okay.
What kind of confuses people sometimes,
Mhm.
up until about 2017,
Mhm.
I could both issue a medical certificate and a student pilot certificate.
Wow.
And because of 2001, September 11th,
Mm.
that all changed. But to change the form requires an act of Congress. So people look on the form and it says, medical certificate and student pilot certificate, and that you can't do that. And it's just
Yeah.
a little confusing.
Yeah. So now all they need is at least that one to
You
go
just come,
start training.
yes, and then through you all or their flight school,
Hmm.
they get the student certificate.
That makes sense. Okay, gotcha. And I didn't even realize that that's part of what people are getting. I'm sure by the end of flight training, you have a stack of certificates.
Yes,
It seems like. I mean, I already know that we give away at least like six, not give away, but
yeah.
we deliver at least like six here. We may offer a few more even outside of that. So I'm wondering what is probably one of your favorite parts about being an AME though? Because I mean, you sound like this is something you knew you wanted to do, and I'd like to give people who are listening a little bit of insight into like an AME's mind, because we just it's just the guy I got to check in with. So
Yeah, no, I mean, I love hangar flying. I
yeah.
love, talking about just flying, the business of flying,
Hmm.
various aircraft. I'm lucky because I have a bunch of pilots, that fly the queen of the skies, the 747,
Hmm.
and that's just a lot of fun to talk. And
Yeah.
it's kind of fun because working in Flower Mound, I think my office is directly under about 10 miles from the threshold of 1.8 at DFW. So
Hmm.
if I time it right, I can go out and see some fun stuff landing, like
Hmm.
the UPS 47. Every once in a while, I catch a 380. So
Yeah. It's funny because I think today I was out. So Patrick has a game bird, and
uh,
I was filming something for him about how to properly prepare with a parachute and strap in and things like that because he takes students on spin training. And while we were out there, me and the student were watching a couple of the jets that were going by, and I'm starting to get to the point where I want to know which one's which,
right,
because I'm like, well, that one's pretty cool, and I'm starting to see the
right.
differences. And he's like, that one's about to go out. That's with Delta, and that one's about to be not in service as any much longer. And then we saw like I don't know if it was a military plane or what, but it was some crazy cool jet. And I was like, now it's time to start learning. And then I think I did a discovery flight maybe a month or two ago unintentionally. I was filming something with one of our chiefs out in Denison. And he's like, "All right, you're gonna land," and I was like, "What?" And of course, he
Right.
made sure it happened, but I was controlling the yoke a little bit, and he took control of the rudders at some point because I was like, "This is like omnidirectional. This is very different from me."
Yeah.
Uh, but now I'm getting to the point where I'm like, "Oh well, maybe I should get my $100 hamburger," and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So maybe I'll come see you soon.
Sounds good. It's a deal.
Right, right. So anyhow, if we let if someone's looking to go ahead and get their medical done, what's the first step? Do they Google an AME near me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically, there's a bunch of websites out there, and including the FAA.
Yeah.
And take them all with a grain of salt.
Mhm.
If you want to get to me directly, that you know call my office.
Mhm.
And there's something called the ZocDoc,
Mhm.
which is you can go out and book appointments through physicians directly on the web, and it
Yeah.
goes directly to them.
Awesome. Oh, that's really cool, and they can find you that way too as
Yeah,
well?
yep.
Gotcha, and then, well, I guess while we're here, do you is there any other, like, profession? Do you do this full time? Is that how this
So
works?
this is kind of my side job.
Mhm. Yeah.
My day job is I specialize in physical medicine and rehabilitation,
Okay.
otherwise known as physiatry. We help get people better after strokes and amputations and
Mm.
hip fractures. So I'm a
Mhm.
medical director of a rehab hospital in Flower Mound, and then the chief medical officer of
Yeah.
the hospital system, of which the hospital in Flower Mound is one hospital in.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. Well, I didn't know all that about you actually before you came in, so, there's it sounds like there's a lot of history there in of
Yeah.
itself. Uh, do you find that many AMEs have like, how much of a medical background do you have to be an AME? I know that's I don't know what kind of
Yeah,
question to
no,
ask.
that's a great question.
Yeah.
No, so basically, to be an AME, you have to be a physician.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter what your specialty is, though. I think a lot of them are, you know, internal medicine.
Mm.
I just because they're more internal medicine. I
Mhm.
think surgery. It's been a long time since I've looked at the statistics,
Right.
but basically, you just have to be a physician, be licensed to practice in your state.
Okay, yeah, and I was assuming that, but it was only an assumption. It
Yeah,
was a
yeah,
presumption.
yeah.
Um, well, okay, I guess I want to kind of double back to some of the, I guess, the questions that puts us a little bit in the weeds. What is one of the most common surprises that surprises people when they come to you, and it stops them from getting their certificate, the medical certificate?
Well, the biggest one, and fortunately I haven't, is trying to hide something, because
Mm.
the FAA will find something. It's, if you have a question, disclose it, right?
Yeah.
And you know, like I said, I've been doing this about a decade now.
Hmm.
So just circle back for just a second
Yeah.
there. When you go for your certificate, there are three outcomes.
Okay.
You can get your certificate when you see the AME. The AME may have to defer it because there's a question about something
Hmm.
that they can't say yes or no at their level, and it's got to go get kicked up to CAMI in Oklahoma City, or or you can get denied. And there are two ways of getting denied. Either the AME can do it, and nobody in my experience has ever done it, or the FAA says no.
Okay.
Um, and I'm doing this for a decade now, and I've had exactly two pilots denied by the FAA.
Okay.
So that's very rare.
Okay.
To get clearance from the FAA, special issuance, um, made a lot of hoops and a lot of heartache,
Yeah.
and a lot of hard-earned cash, but it is doable.
And that's what someone else said on the podcast. They're saying like maybe a lot of people who get stopped by the FAA isn't maybe due to denial, but more so because it becomes a little bit difficult if you do have to jump through a few hoops. But it's totally achievable.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think over the last couple years, the FAA has, sort of like taken a look at things, and they're like, oh, okay, we have biggest thing up until about 5, 6 years ago was diabetes, both treated with medicine and both treated with insulin.
Hmm.
And the FAA now has protocols in place
Mm.
uh, for certifying pilots with diabetes, and both type 1 on requiring insulin, and
Hmm.
type 2 diabetes that can be on orals or insulin.
Right. Right. Okay. That
Um,
makes sense.
and the other nice thing is, I think partly, and again, this is just speculation on my part, that they've seen a lot of veterans who are service connected for things like PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, and there are ways of getting through with that. Um, and the other thing along those lines, same thing with anxiety disorder, and ADHD, ADD,
Hmm.
adult hyperactivity disorder, attention
Hmm.
disorder.
you're saying they're making protocols that allow.
Mm,
Okay, gotcha.
exactly. So
And,
yeah.
and does that include and again, I don't know very well, so but someone who's maybe has ADHD or something like that, and they've been prescribed medicine and things like that. I know that's some of the things that maybe kicks it up to the FAA,
So
right? Or
yes.
CAMI.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then so now that we're kind of, I guess I'm gonna try to track it here. Now that we're kind of aware that some of these things are what pop up and could cause for a little bit longer of a an examination, I guess. Um, what do some of those hoops maybe look like?
For example, with diabetes or sleep apnea, you got to be following with the physician that make sure that your lab work is good, your
Mm,
health is good, you're compliant with the therapy,
mhm,
and that he or she has no concern about
mm.
your health.
Gotcha. So it's kind of going through those sorts of steps. And
Yeah.
do you find that a lot of people? I don't know how much you know this, but do you find that a lot of people fall off around that time if they do have to go through a deferral process?
No, I haven't. Like, if you're going to do this, then you're committed to it, right? I mean,
Hmm.
there's that old joke. What's the difference between being acquainted and committed?
Yeah.
In bacon and eggs, the pig is committed and the chicken is acquainted. But
Okay. I see what you're saying. That's good.
yeah, no,
I didn't know that.
yeah.
I haven't
Uh,
heard that one. Um,
but basically, if this is the career path you want to take, it's a lot of anxiety and sleepless nights, but you can generally get through.
okay. And because I hear a lot of even from the admissions team, and they go through the process of helping people have everything in order so that they can start training. Uh, people have a lot of questions around the medical side of things, and a lot of people have the sort of this fear. And it's almost like maybe there's a fear of AMEs. I don't know,
Yeah.
because they think they're like the gatekeeper, maybe. And it, like you said, from what you're saying, it doesn't sound like that.
You're okay. You're a professional pilot. This is how put light the lights and pay the mortgage and all of that.
Hmm.
And one little hiccup, and then your FA pulls your medical, and then you're SOL. So everybody's like, oh, you gotta hide this under the rug. Well,
Hmm.
first of all, no bueno with that.
Yeah.
Second of all, it's the fear of the unknown, right?
Hmm.
There's a lot of things that if you help me help you, then we can hash it out. I mean,
Right.
and there are a lot of other people around that who, if I can't do it, can certainly help.
Yeah,
So
and I think that's one reason I'm excited to have you here. The team's excited to have you here because it's a bit of an opportunity to kind of demystify some of that stuff. Like you said, the fear of the unknown. Oh, we don't really want. No one wants that, right? So,
yeah, no,
is there anything while we're here that you would say you would want people to know before they get to the process of even seeing you
that
that you haven't said, I
I mean,
guess.
basically, to loop back to what we were saying
Yeah.
or before, is that if you think you have a question about your health,
Mhm.
and if you have any documentation on it, progress notes, notes from your doctor, what have you, just gather them and um, and call when before you book an appointment and say, hey, can I speak to you as an AME because I got a couple of questions.
Mhm.
And that way, A, you can demystify it, and B, if if there could be potential problems, your AME can look at and say, okay, well, this is what you're telling me. Okay, looking at the guide from the FAA,
Mhm.
all right, gather this information, and then I can also, discreetly ask questions of the FAA,
Mhm.
what we need to do with this.
Right.
So, which will speed up the process and reduce your stress level.
Right, and just so that I mean, I want to like what I'm hearing too is that we just want to make sure we take the most efficient steps that are available when there are things that may come up, and the opposite of that is
Right.
not being ahead of it. You
Yeah.
want to be proactive here,
Yep.
because sometimes it seems like there are protocols that can benefit someone in getting through these steps, but finding out at a certain time in your process could actually hinder you more than just upfront.
Right.
Yeah. So
It's like what they say, you always want to be ahead of the airplane rather than behind it.
right, so it's the same conversation, exactly. Okay, well, earlier you had said something that made me want to ask a question about some people even have the fear of later on in their career that maybe their certificate's pulled and they don't get to fly anymore or something like that. Have you seen any correlations between people's lifestyles that may equate to that happening or not happening? Like, are there what kind of lifestyles are conducive to being able to be a good pilot for a long period of time?
Well, I mean, basically, it's no different than, what makes you is just, a non-flyer, right? You got
Right.
to eat right, get plenty of sleep,
Mhm.
exercise, and, eat right and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but that being said, as people age, things happen, right? People
Exactly.
get heart disease, people get diabetes, people have vision issues, people
Mhm.
have thyroid issues.
Mhm.
And these are all things that, you know, can be addressed if you just say, look, this is what I have.
Gotcha. I see. One of the pilots I had, I don't remember who said it. They were talking with me on the podcast, and they said one surprise of becoming a pilot is the difficulty in maintaining a healthy lifestyle. Actually, because you are on the road, you're not at home. You don't have the food to cook. Maybe your significant other is not cooking for you. You're at airports. You're at hotels. So it could be easy to not sleep, not exercise, not eat well. And so I guess I just wanted to bring that up. That could be you kind of have to put a little effort into being healthy
Yeah.
as a pilot.
Yep.
That would make sense. And then you know there's logistics and costs going into getting your certificate and things like that. Do AMEs take insurance?
No, this is all cash up front.
Mhm.
If you need additional testing, like an echocardiogram or um, like or further neurologic testing, then maybe your insurance will pick it up. But generally, the medical is not covered by insurance.
I see what you're saying. So, like, if there's some concerns that, hey, we need this test and some of these papers and documents and results, if that's something that's normally covered under your insurance, you can have
Correct.
that
Yeah.
done and then supply documentation.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And then, is there like a flat cost that goes along with this? I don't know if that's something you're able to talk about.
So yeah, I mean, every AME, it's just like when you go to visit your doctor, they charge whatever they charge.
Mm.
So generally, there is a fee for the exam.
Hmm.
Um, if you're 35
Hmm.
or older and you need an EKG, then there's an additional cost with that. And there's just something new that the FAA rolled out in January of this year.
Okay.
So for color vision, used to be up until December 31st of 2024, you would need to go and do a color vision test.
Hmm.
Generally, unless you have a certain medical conditions or on certain medications,
Hmm.
your color vision doesn't change. So
Right.
what the FAA did is requiring all pilots who have not had a medical prior to December 31st, 2024. So if
Mm.
you had class 1, 2, or 3 medical prior to January 1st of this year, you're grandfathered in. You never need to take another color vision test.
Mm.
So going forward, only new pilots who've never had a medical
Hmm.
of any class, um, need a computerized vision test, and the FAA has designated, I think, 3 or 4 computerized tests that the AME needs to purchase. So there'll be an additional expense for that.
Okay.
Uh,
Gotcha. And so that's something that's kind of new and developed
yeah,
a little bit.
but that's only a one-time cost because once unless something changes, um, you'll never need to do a color vision test again.
Yeah, exactly. Eh, Um, I think that's good to note because a lot of updates happen in a lot of areas of
Yeah.
aviation. It can be a bit difficult to keep up. So I appreciate you sharing that. And actually, that this reminds me, yeah, sure, there's a cost, and there's even chance of deferral or some elongated process potentially. If this is something you want to do, there shouldn't be much to let you stop you. Of course, there's difficult circumstances, there's commitments, there's money. I mean, even the cost of flight school. If you're looking to be an airline pilot, I mean, I mean, it is very expensive.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone. I mean, sure, go get surprised if you need to call someone and ask how much it costs. Call a couple of different schools, but the point is that people are pilots and they love it, and there is an outcome. There's a light at the end of the tunnel that if you desire that, you can get there. And I guess that's something that seems to be shared by everyone who does get there. And on the internet, there's always like, well, worry about this and worry about that. There's so much hypervigilance, it seems like, when really you can take a couple steps and figure out for yourself. And if you really want to do something, ask the right people.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, yeah, like, last time I checked, and this is really old numbers, but I think less than 1% of the world's population, um, has the skills to, operate an aircraft, fly an aircraft. And
wow.
that's pretty cool. And yeah, I mean, if you want to do this, and this is just, aviation is a lot of fun, and there's a lot of things you can do across, your aviation, and that,
Yeah.
this is, one of your first steps, this being getting a one class 1, 2, or 3 medical.
Hmm. Yeah.
And and in most cases it's doable.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, I mean, I think we're nearing the end here. We've covered a lot of good things. And I mean, I feel like I'm sure I'm going to think plenty of things to ask you later. What we'll do is, if you guys are still listening, this isn't the outro, but if you're still listening, first of all, hit the subscribe button. It's very helpful. But also, questions. If you have questions for any AME at this point, maybe we have a guest here that can help a little bit. So leave those
Happy
in the
to.
comments. Yes, I'll keep up to date with you on those. I say that all the time, but I mean, I know we're gonna have plenty of questions, so
Sounds
those are
good.
very welcome. But I guess to go out on maybe a final question or two, I would love to ask, if someone's coming to see you, what are some things that help them when they come to see you in terms of preparation? How does someone prepare to come see you?
So basically, if you have no questions, then show up,
Yeah,
say hi, we'll chat, we'll do the exam, and um, if everything's good, leave with your certificate in your pocket, and you're good to go.
awesome. Yeah.
And then, like I said, and if you have any questions, or you think you have any questions about your health, gather as much paperwork as you have available,
Hmm.
and if everything works out, then again you'll have your certificate. If not, then we'll have a plan of action as to what to do to get you there.
And is there any like pretty standard or documentation that almost anyone could expect to bring?
Yeah, I mean, everybody has healthcare apps that that you can, get on with your primary care physician or any other specialist that you have. And, I have plenty of pilots who, we talk about it, and they pull it out and they email it to, and I can upload it to the FAA if there's
Okay.
any questions. So
So know
yeah.
your login and password basically for your,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I'm
that
sure
that's
that's more
helpful.
likely to be an
Or
issue.
or at least, yes, or at least have it saved on your phone. Yeah.
Exactly. I have a Dropbox file and a note. I have it all somewhere in
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
So if I need to find my car insurance or my health insurance, I can find that.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I mean, I don't know if there's any other things you would think that people that you'd love to address while you have an audience, but I think we've done a great job here.
Yeah, thank you. This has
Yeah.
been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, today was a great episode. If you guys are still listening, once more, hit like, subscribe. Be sure to leave a comment. A lot of our listeners still aren't. A lot of our regular listeners still aren't subscribed, and it really helps more people find important information like what we're being able to share today. So appreciate you for joining us on this episode of Pilots Say What, where we hear what pilots have to say, or in this case, an AME. And we'll see you guys on the next episode.